We thank you very much for honoring our invite. And once again, a big thank you to everyone that has been able to join these invites for leaving your schedule and joining this. To say a big thank you. Data privacy, indeed, is something we take very seriously. Incredibly. We take it very seriously because it's the core of what we do. For instance, a lot of people don't know that you can actually open an account without ever visiting the bank. I've actually opened 2 accounts this year. One was telling and then the other without visiting the account, without visiting the bank rather. But then you start to wonder what happens if, for instance, I have access to very private or confidential information of other third party or individuals that I'm not supposed to have access to. And I decide, for instance, to open a bank account with their information and perhaps even start taking credit or loans with that account, and they are not even aware of it. The beauty and perhaps the burden of data privacy is this. It should guarantee and it should be granted that at any given point in time when data is provided, either to credit bureaus or to organizations that have to deal with data, the data should be confidential. It should not be released to any third party without the consent of the original owner. And that's the core of what this training is all about, this webinar is all about indeed. Again, data privacy and data security are closely intertwined. And the goal again is to just make sure that not only is the data private, but it's also very secure. And you would, for instance, for those that are very conversant with our credit portal, you would see that for you to even generate a report or on the portal, you have to first provide your reason. You must say that this is why I'm generating this report for this person. And that consent is what we actually give back to the individual that originally wants the data and say, this person put a report on you at this time with a timestamp on it for this reason, and you need to be aware of that. So they get a notification on our high monitor, and at the same time, the third party gets a report, and only authorized third party can do that. We've also been able to, engage with due processes and compliance, like the Gdpr and the Gdpr for reasons best known for data-related reasons, to make sure that we are compliant with national and global practices. Once again, I'd like to say a very big thank you to everyone. Without much ado, please give room to the speakers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. MD, for that wonderful opening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, the hour we have been waiting patiently for is here. So we'll advise you pick up your pen to take notes on possible ways you can comfortably secure the data at your disposal. Because I myself am eager to learn a lot from these seasoned speakers. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be shared to all registered participants. So I will be calling on the first speaker for this event, in the person of Mr. Ayokunle Olaniyi. Mr. Ayokunle Olaniyi is a certified lead implementer and lead auditor in information security, cyber security, and incident management. Certified instructor for both PECB and E-Council. Certified computer hacking forensic investigator. He's also a certified application security engineer. He has audited so many financial and non-financial institutions within and outside Nigeria on information security. He will be taking us on data privacy, protection, and compliance from audit perspective. So let's welcome Mr. Ayokunle Olaniyi for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Ohalite. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ayokunle Olaniyi. I'm a cybersecurity consultant in Antarctic Technologies. Before I actually start, I am aware I have just 20 minutes to take you through my presentation. Before I actually start, I want to appreciate First Central Credit Bureau for the honor of being among these great speakers to deliver my keynote speech. My keynote speech actually centers on data privacy, protection, and compliance audits. So I have a couple of slides I'm going to share with you to take us through the presentation this morning. Please, can you see it?
Yes, sir. Who can see your screen?
All right, thank you very much. So my keynote speech for the next 20 minutes actually centers on data privacy, protection, and compliance audits. We have realized that a lot of people don't really know the differences between privacy and protection. So they use them interchangeably. Some use privacy for protection, some use protection for privacy. Then I'm also going to take you through the necessity for compliance audits in your environment or in any industry where you find yourself. I think much have actually been said about me. So yeah, I'll just go straight to the history of data protection and privacy. Data protection and privacy didn't just start today. If you look at it, it can be dated back to 1890. That's over 10 decades ago, when the precursor of the current law, you know, we have the NDPR in Nigeria, we have the GDPR in Europe, we have all sorts of laws all over the continent, all over the countries, all over the world. But it actually started in 1890 or a few years before then, when two lawyers, Samuel D. Warren and Louis Brandon, actually wrote an article which they titled Right to Privacy. That was the first article that was actually published, where they argued the rights for human beings to actually be left alone. So, you know, the rights, they were just trying to argue the fact that human beings actually have the right to be left alone. So that was when they published that article. Then straight down to 2016, the GDPR was published. There were a lot of other things, other publications that happened in between. So, but there's no point running through all of that because of our time. So in 2016, the GDPR was approved by the European Union Parliament after 4 years of discussion, meaning that they initiated that in 2012, but they kept discussing it. And in 2018, the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, it was enforced. And then before the GDPR, they have the Data Protection Act. So they replaced the Data Protection Act with the GDPR in 2018. So it was enforced. So what was the GDPR all about? It actually emphasizes the need for general protection and privacy in the European Union. Then it also looked at data privacy and protection when there was a need for PII to be transferred from one part of the country to the other, or even outside of the whole European Union. Then in 2019, our dear NITDA here in Nigeria, Nigeria Information Technology Development Agency, came up with this. Though prior to that, we have the Cybercrime Act. So, but the NITDA became so popular, and I mean, the NDPR, which NITDA came up with, became so popular, and in fact, it became something very, very important for organizations to actually adhere to. So it's now a compliance thing, like what organizations need to comply with to be certified as an organization that really cares about people's data privacy and protection. If you look at the NDPR, NITDA actually came up with the NDPR. If you look at section 2.6 of it, now, you know, the idea is for us to be able to differentiate between, between data privacy and protection. Now, I'm going to take that from what we have in the section 6 of data security of NDPR. It states that anyone involved in data processing or the control of data. Now, you know, OFIs, other financial institutions, banks, commercial organizations, and all other organizations, one way or the other, you gather people's details, you gather people's personally identifiable information. So if you do that, then this particular regulation actually speaks to you, or this particular rule actually talks to you. It states anyone involved, including you are involved in data processing or the control of data, you shall. Now, the fact that the verb shall is being used there, that means it's mandatory. So NITDA is a regulatory body for data protection and data privacy. So they are passing a regulation which is binding on anybody in the country, not just the banks, not just commercial banks, not just the other financial institutions, the OFI. It is binding on anybody. You can see it says anyone. So everybody is being controlled by this. Then it says that you shall, which is mandatory, as long as you process data, you control data. So you shall develop security measures. So if you don't develop security measures, it simply means that you are not complying to NITDA's regulations. And I'm sure some of us have heard the cases of non-compliance and what it led to. Some had to pay 5 million, some had to pay 10 million. And I'm sure very soon we're going to have a whole lot of people that will still pay more millions in that case of Naira. But it is not, it says that you shall develop security measures to protect data. Such measures include, but are not limited to, protecting systems. It simply means that you have to protect your systems from hackers. How you are going to do that is left to you. You are going to set up firewalls. Firewalls are appliances or softwares that filter the kind of traffic that goes into your network and the one that goes out of your network. So what they're saying there is you need a firewall. Then you have to store data securely with access to specific authorized individuals. Then employing data encryption technologies, whether hashing, whether you use asymmetric encryption or symmetric encryption, or you even do steganography. Steganography is about hiding sensitive information behind what is seen in the public. Like you can hide something behind an MP3, you can hide sensitive information behind an MP4, and nobody will know something sensitive is being passed across. So, but most importantly, NDPR is saying you have to employ data encryption technology. Then you have to develop organizational policy for handling personal data. Then protection of emailing systems and continuous capacity building for staff. Now, you will see that I have actually broken this down into, I've highlighted two major things or two sections in this particular regulation. The one in green and the one in yellow. The one in green talks about protection against hackers, against unauthorized individuals. Then the other one talks about handling of personal data. Now you have the data. How do you handle the data? So that is where data privacy actually stems from. So the NDPR caters to both protection and privacy in this case. So protection, you protecting it from hackers using firewall, then ensuring that you secure the data securely. Then now that you have the data, how do you handle it? You handle it based on the laws, you handle it based on the consent of the owner of the data, you handle it based on several things. So that is where the distinction between data protection and data privacy actually comes in. So take a look at it. What exactly is data protection? Data protection is not one thing. It involves several strategies. In some cases, some of the strategies may include using a data loss prevention tool that will prevent your data from being hijacked by a man in the middle. Firewall that will prevent any unnecessary traffic from getting into your organization, then to reading your content, to reading your data. Authentication, encryption, hashing, endpoint protection. So all these are some of the strategies. You may need to also come up with policies and all of that. All these are strategies. So data protection is just not one thing. It's a set of strategies that eventually help to secure your data, ensuring confidentiality, availability, integrity of data against unauthorized access. So data protection is a set of strategies that prevent unauthorized access from outside of your organization. If you look at everything, what we're just trying to do is to ensure confidentiality, availability, and integrity of data against unauthorized access. Now, ISO 27001 A1813 there talks about data protection. And so, you know, that is, ISO is international standard. And 27001, the ISO 27001 there is for Information Security Management System. So it's a standard that has been adopted by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And the Central Bank of Nigeria is saying all banks, all commercial banks should adopt it. Then they're also saying all other OFI, the other financial institutions should adopt it. In fact, the OFIs have been given deadlines. I'm going to share some of the deadlines with you. So data protection is something that is very, very important. Gdpr is emphasizing it. CBN is emphasizing it. Then even for those who care about their data, even if Gdpr is not emphasizing it or CBN has not adopted it, then it simply means that everybody should adopt it so as to be able to protect the data they have in their care. Now, look at data protection at a glance. Consists of the traditional data protection method. Sometimes we need to back up our data, is part of data protection. We need to replicate the data so that if there's an issue, we can always fall back to the replicated data. So it also consists of data security. You can see the data protection is all encompassing. It covers every other area, including data privacy itself. So data privacy is more like a subset of data protection. So you have your traditional data protection, your data security mechanisms, and data privacy itself. So when you use data privacy for data protection, well, somehow you are correct, you are okay at that point, but you need to know the actual distinction between the data protection itself and data privacy. So data privacy is actually seen as a subset of data protection. So what exactly is data privacy? Now you have the data. How do you handle the data? Data privacy simply expresses the level of rights anybody should have to that data. It is the right to control your personal data, your personally identifiable information, the right to control how your data is being used. Now, most of the time, when you sign up in an organizational information system, there will be some clauses that will tell you or remind you of how your data is going to be used. Those are about privacy. They are saying, we are collecting your information. This is who would have access to it. We will make sure we don't sell your data. We'll make sure no third party actually has access to your data. You have the right to control your data. Nobody should have access to your data without your consent. That's about privacy. For example, you are employed in an organization, and an organization needs to carry out a background check on you. For example, result verification check, and they go to your university without actually seeking your consent. It simply means that they are intruding on your privacy, because you have the right to either reject or accept it, to either reject or consent to it. So, but most of the time, before you are employed, there would have been some clauses where you need to sign and say, okay, they can actually conduct that background check on you. So it is, you have the right to control your data. So data privacy is about that right. How third parties who are custodians of your data should handle it is based on certain policies, certain regulations or legislation in that particular country. Then most importantly, your consent. It is very important, and you need to be aware of this before you throw up your data into any information system. Now, look at this scenario. Actually tries to break it down. That actually tries to let us see the distinction between data privacy and data protection. A financial institution sets up firewall rules to prevent unwanted traffic to access customers' PII. PII is personally identifiable information, which could include your name, your maiden name, mother's maiden name, and some other details that can be used to uniquely identify you. So the advice is that every organization should come up with a PII policy where you can easily stipulate what and what are regarded as PII. Because you find out that in certain organizations, what is regarded as PII in organization A is different from what is regarded as PII in organization B. Even what is regarded as PII in a country is different from what is regarded as a PII in another country. I'll give you an example. IP address of our machines. In the US, IP address is regarded as a PII. In the UK, IP address is not regarded as a PII, or vice versa. Now, you realize that if something happens, you now need to look at, okay, where is the offense, or where is the cybercrime coming from? So if I have access to your IP, does that mean I have access to your PII? So every organization should come up with what you call the PII policy. List what and what you regard as the PII. NDPR has helped you to an extent. If you check the NDPR itself, you see a list of things that are considered as PII in that case. So a financial institution sets up firewall rules to prevent unwanted traffic. Some of those traffic might be malicious traffic, trying to read your customers' data. What they are doing in that case is protection. When you come up with firewall rule that is preventing unauthorized people from outside from accessing the organization's information. But on the other hand, privacy provisions might limit access to customers' balance. I'll give you an instance. You walk up to the lady at the counter in the bank. You want to withdraw an amount that is above what you have on ground. The lady will tell you, that the message she actually gets is that what you're trying to withdraw is more than what you have in your balance. Then she will direct you to customer care to go and find out what your balance is. It simply means that the person at the counter is not privy to the information as regards your balance in that case. That is data privacy. How the bank should handle your data. The bank just wants to ensure that people who should not have access to your data should not have access to it. The bank already has your data. So it is not every member of staff that should have access to the data. It is only a few selected persons who could do that. And they are doing that based on some rules, based on some policies. So you can see, setting up firewall rule is about protection, but privacy now comes down to who should actually have access to it. So that's a scenario to show you the distinction between protection and privacy in that case. So that's just what the data privacy and data protection is about. Now, we now come up to compliance audits. There is a difference between compliance and conformity. Compliance is to, let me start with conformity. You conform to international standards. International standards are usually voluntary in most countries. They are not mandatory. But you comply to local laws, local regulations, local constitutions. Local laws, local constitutions, local regulations are mandatory, but international standards are not mandatory. International standards are voluntary. So, but when a regulatory body in your country, in your local environment, adopts the international standard, then it becomes mandatory. CBN has adopted ISO 27001. CBN has adopted PCI DSS. CBN has adopted ISO 27032, especially for the banking or financial industry. That simply means it is mandatory for everybody in that case. So it has become more or less a regulation that they have to follow. So doing that now means that they are complying to the CBN's regulation. They are complying to the NITS, that's NDPR. So you can see the distinction between compliance and conformity. Conformity is to the local laws and regulation, and it is mandatory. Compliance is to the local laws and regulations. And those regulations are mandatory. Otherwise, they will close your shop, they will close your company. So, but conformity is not mandatory. Conformity is not mandatory, it's voluntary, but it becomes mandatory when your regulatory body adopts it. So NITDA is a regulatory body here. CBN is a regulatory body, but our focus is on data protection and data privacy. So our emphasis is going to be on the NITDA's NDPR. So data protection compliance organizations are the only ones who are licensed to carry out such compliance audits against NITDA's NDPR. So you need the protection compliance organizations to be able to do that. Not just anybody can do that. And we have a couple of them, over 100 of them, where that you can actually engage to carry out such compliance audits. Now, look at some of the CBN requirements that we have and the timeline for the OFIs especially. A lot of the commercial banks have implemented some of these things. Now, if you look at here where we have the NDPR, that's the fifth row, you have the NDPR. They are given June 2022. So you are expected to download the NDPR and get what the content actually looks like so that you can meet up with the deadline. It is actually about 6 months to go or thereabout. So it's something you need to look at and then strive to actually meet up with it. Otherwise, you get some fines. That is applicable to the OFIs, the other financial institutions. So you really have to look at that. And CBN has their own timeline. I mean, yeah, so this is CBN's timeline for NDPR that you really need to download it and ensure you implement it accordingly. So those are some of the things. Yeah, so if you look at the NDPR itself, you have the part 1, you have the part 2, you have the part 3, you have the part 4 with the different things you are meant to do in all the cases. That is it. So what is the implication of non-compliance? When you don't comply, what are those things you are likely going to face? I'm sure you are aware of the company that was fined, was it 10 million or so? Because they were copying other people's details. You know what they were doing? Is it Soko Loan or what's the name of the company? Now, if you are trying to get a loan, you know what they do? They'll copy the contacts on your phone without your consent. So if you default, if you don't pay the loan early enough, you know what they do? They broadcast your message. They broadcast the message across to your contact. I have received some of such messages telling me so person is owing. Did you tell me when you lent this person the money? I was not carried along. Now, you are even intruding into my own privacy by sending me a message about someone whom you lent some money. How am I supposed to know when you lent him or how much you lent him? So it was causing a lot of public privacy intrusion. They copy contacts from the person who is trying to get the loan. So it was a lot of problem. That's why NITDA is doing the needful now. NITDA has fined several companies. I don't have the number at the moment. So to avoid that, you have to comply as early as possible. Then reputational damage is also an issue. Imagine when you don't comply and you are fined or sanctioned or litigations are taken up against you, you know, that doesn't speak well of your company. Customers will even begin to lose confidence on you when you copy the content in their in their contacts without their consent. Sometimes you might even lose your licenses or you even lose the whole business around that. So those are some of the implications you can actually encounter in the case of non-compliance. I want to say a very big thank you for the opportunity to make this short presentation within the time allotted to me. So it would be nice if you have people with some questions and answers at the moment.
Wow. Mr. Ayokunle, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. In fact, I'm speechless because you've exceeded our expectations. I think from my end, I have a question for you. I think I have a question for you. Please, what is the best way data can be protected when moving from one location to another, both within and outside an organization without affecting the availability of the information?
Yes, Thank you very much for that question. What's the best way to protect your data? Like I said, data protection is not one thing. Data protection is a set of strategies that you adopt. So it is not just, there is no one particular best way to do that. It's a combination of several ways, several methods. So because it's a set of strategies that you adopt, you back up, you ensure that someone doesn't tamper with the data, you compute the hash of the backup at the initial location, you set up your firewall rule, you come up with policies and all of that. So there is no one particular way. It is a set of strategies that you have to adopt here and there.
Wow. Thank you so much. I believe other participants has other questions. Mr. Abbas.
Oh, yes. We have a question from one of the attendees who wants to remain anonymous. He wants to know what can be done as a regulator or what's being done with regards to the fintech and the data privacy.
All right. Yes. Thank you. What can the regulators do as regards to them? So like I showed you, fintechs are part of the other financial institution. So, you know, we have commercial institution, we have the other financial institution, and that's where I showed you a deadline for other financial institutions. So fintech is one of them. That case, maybe I can take you back to that. So we are working on them. Everybody who stores, anybody, any organization who stores anybody's data, as long as you collect people's data, then the NDPR is binding on you. So it is not only CBN for financial and the OFI, the NDPR of NITDA is binding on everybody, irrespective of what you do. So if they find out you are a fintech or you are not even a fintech and you are not handling people's data privacy or protection well, then very soon NITDA will get on you. That's it. So they are actually regulating all of. So these are some of the regulations, and I'm sure with time some more will be out. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's all for now. We can take the rest.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Abbas, and thank you, Mr. Ayokunle, for speaking to us.
I think someone dropped something here. He said you referenced the fintech that sends
Thank you very much,
messages
Mr.
to contacts. Can you throw more light on such sanction? Yeah. So what happens here is that now there was this loan giving organization. You download their app. Then while you're downloading their app, you know, at that time you need money. So you just check everything and say, yes, yes, yes. One of the yeses in quotes that you have checked is that they can access your data. Or sometimes you don't even check yes, and before you know it, they have accessed all the data, all the contacts, all your contacts on your phone. And when they are sending information, when you default, when you don't pay early enough, then they will send information to all your to all those people on your contacts. I think I received one of such messages from my colleague in secondary school. That was several years ago. Someone I have not spoken to in how many years. Then I got a message that he was owing, that he was a bad person. He was on the run. He was doing this. How am I supposed to, like, what's my business with that? So all I couldn't just do anything, but I felt my privacy was even being invaded into. So in that case, people don't like that. Why should you copy my contacts without my consent? And why should you be sending messages? You are spamming us. That's what it means. Spamming is a cyber crime which should be avoided. So you are spamming me because you are sending unsolicited mails to me. So things like that should not be allowed. And that was why NDPR sanctioned them. NDPR asked them to pay some money. There are cases of, I think there was a case of 10 million. In fact, there was a company that was meant to pay an amount of money. And they said if they pay the money, then their own company will not exist again. That what is the worth of the whole company itself? So if you are paying a fine that is more than the worth of the whole company, you know, that's a big problem. So they're actually regulating them, whether fintech or non-fintech. NDPR is